You hear what
Is
I'm doing
that
to warm up
is
for you?
is that you jamming back there?
I'm using that to warm up for you.
You all right with me? I like, did I get the wrong thing? It's like, yeah, I'm starting to go here with that. DJ Dwight in the house. I like that.
Oh man. All right. So let me pull up my long list of questions that I got for you.
Oh God, okay.
Listen, did I use the wrong picture in the ad for you? Because I saw a different picture on your birthday greeting for Dickie.
No, the one that I picked out for him is one that in that picture, and you can see a very thin Michael Brown standing there, Dickie.
Okay.
I'm behind him. So, Michael's always trying to get in front, right? So that was that was for Dickie. The one that you pulled out was me and the young man in the rear when someone actually took a picture of me. Normally, I was behind the camera. That's why there are less pictures you find of me, because usually I'm the guy I was the kid. I was the baby, so I was taking all the pictures.
Well, see, that brings me to the other question. So I'm going to call out some names, and you tell me your relationship with them.
Okay.
So the aforementioned Dick Harrow.
We started in 1970, I will say for me, 75. When I first met Larry Hartsell, I met Dick Harrow at the same time. And I mistook Larry Hartsell for Dick Harrow and vice versa, because Dick is a little thin guy. And Larry had, I'm 11 years old. And I'm thinking he started with Bruce Lee. The beer belly thing just didn't fit in my 11-year-old mind. Mm-hmm. So I always start to Dickie thinking he was Larry Hartsell. And Larry said, "No, I'm Larry Hartsell." And I'm like, okay. And please still let me train.
Okay.
So
all right.
He's my redhead brother.
Okay.
From another mother.
Bruce Jolly.
Bruce Jolly is a student of ours who started coming up in the early 80s. He eventually relocated down toward the Atlanta area, and he started working with our good friend Francis Fong down there. And he's well versed in that. And Bruce is a dear heart. I wanted to kill him a couple of times in the past. He's a good guy. Love him dearly.
Okay. The aforementioned Michael Brown.
Oh God. Michael's like the brother that from another mother. We grew up in the same neighborhood, and training partner since I was 11 years old. The three of us were like the Three Stooges. So you couldn't find Michael Brown and not find me in the 70s or the 80s, or find me, Michael Brown, and Dickie following Larry Hartsell around in Charlotte.
Okay. Rob Kelly.
Rob was probably the last of the second era students that came through. Larry had started relocating back to Los Angeles with Rob and those groups that came along, and he started getting more influenced by the advent of Muay Thai. Master Chai had started doing his seminars at that time. So Rob became a product of that era, and obviously went on and became certified under Guru Dan and Larry and Chai in those respective martial arts. So he's a good friend as well.
So here's what this is leading up to.
Okay.
I met and have known those four guys years ago.
Okay.
Years ago.
Yeah.
How come I'm only now meeting you?
That's a good question, actually. The honest answer is, for me, I never got the opportunity as much to be, I guess, out traveling where people paid attention to me. I was the baby. And what that means is I met Larry Hartsell when I was 11 years old. I had to tell him I was 13 in order for him to even take me seriously, because there were no children in his group at that time.
Okay.
So I was tall for my age, and I was boxing in the athletic league at the time and did some taekwondo, and essentially told him a white lie that I was 13. He knew I was lying, but he took me on anyway. Fast forward, I kind of became his senior student because I was, the baby. So they all of these guys, Michael and Dickie, and there were people like Joe Goodnight and Mike and Bob Moore, who were Larry's students at the time. And again, these guys were all in their 20s, 19, 20, 25 years old, and I'm a kid.
Yeah.
So I had the benefit of all of those people training with the premier Jeet Kune Do fighter to kind of groom me. By the time it exploded in the 80s and Larry started writing the books and the videos and that sort of thing, I had become a dad, a very young father, and was trying to take care of a family. So I continued to train, but I couldn't pursue being in front of the camera, in front of the magazines as much until much later. My kids are adults now, and that marriage is over now, thank God. And, you know, I kind of get back in it now. But I've never stopped training, and I'd continue to stay in touch with Guru Dan and Guru Larry until Larry passed. And through that, I got an opportunity to train with a lot of people that I would not have gotten the opportunity had it not been for Larry putting that in my head. For example, training with Ted Wong at a seminar is great, but having 6 weeks to train with him is immeasurable. The same with meeting Jesse Glover and working with him, or spending time with Howard Williams, and I can go on and on.
Yeah.
And so while Michael and Dickie and some of the other folks got more opportunity to be in videos and this kind of thing, I was raising my kids. And so a lot of people forgot about me until I'd show up occasionally and go, where's this guy with all these skill sets? And they go, it's Larry Hartsell's premier student. And people would get amnesia, and then I'd have to remind them, like, before all of you guys, there was me. And then I pull out old Polaroids and they go, oh, yeah, the guy with the Jerry curl and the afro pictures. Yeah, so I've always been there, but unfortunately, the rounds I made stopped abruptly until about the late 1990s.
Okay. That and the picture that I used, and then the one that you posted for Dickie's birthday. So that you guys are in Filipino garb. That's a demonstration for what?
We used to do here in Charlotte. The University of North Carolina has several campuses. One in Charlotte, it's called UNC Charlotte, and they would do an international festival every year.
Okay.
And at that time, one of our students, who was married to a Filipino woman, that made the costumes that we were wearing.
Oh, sweet.
And she was immersed in the culture. And obviously, we were trying to be more immersed in everything. And we got invited on several occasions to do the demonstrations for representing the Filipino community. So it was great for us because there was so little exposure to Kali or Scream or Arnis back then, other than saying, when Bruce Lee picked up the two sticks and entered the dragon, and people of that era would go, okay, I get it.
Yeah.
But outside of that, people had no idea. So Michael Brown and I walk around Charlotte with machetes in the 80s, and Dick Harold and I walking around with Chris knives, and we would do all those things, and it was helping to promote the art. And so Guru Dan would come and keep us up in the material, and it was like this little, I would call, friendly competition between the Filipino Kali Academy and our school, because we were kind of out in the wilderness at that time. You have to look back.
That was the 70s?
This was those pictures were early 80s, but we started doing them in the 70s. There's some that probably aren't out there that I have that we did probably in 77, 78. We did those things back as far as me being in middle school or junior high. Yeah.
So what you're saying then is that essentially there were two official or authentic JKD places in the U.S. The Kali Academy and Larry Hartsell's group in Carolina.
Sure. Well, and of course, and obviously Taki Kimura's group in Seattle.
Yeah.
So, and in Guru Dan's first book that he wrote on Jeet Kune Do, he made reference to that. And when Larry relocated here, his mother was ill, and he opened up a school and was given limited access. And Guru Dan had him very strictly teach certain pieces of material. There was a closed door group at that time. You had to be voted into that group. And as I was the last original of his first generation students that was admitted into that group at that time. And so that's why in our hierarchy, Dickie would be my senior, Micah would be just under Dickie, and then I would be considered the baby. So in our trilogy, we all liking to say we're members of the Commodores, but we all know I'm Lionel Richie. But
yeah. So the demonstrations on campus, were they to promote a school? At that time, were you guys operating out of a school?
Absolutely. We had several facilities in the Charlotte area that Larry would run, and well, Larry would open them up, and essentially Dickie, and to his credit, Dickie's always been more of the facilitator or the administrator of the early school. Part of that because he was the adult. I mean, I still had a paper route, so I learned the business that way. But Dickie ran it. Michael and I kind of policed it, and the three of us would be there when Larry wasn't. And then once Larry got his notoriety and opportunity to kind of go back on the national stage, it fell to us to try to take that legacy and run with it. And each in our own different way we have. I mean, we all draw the water from the same well. And so, like I always tell my people here, training with me is still like training with Michael or training with Dickie, or even if they went down to train with you. We drew the water from the same well because of Guru Dan or Guru Larry, or different people. The material still comes from Qigong Bruce Lee, but my interpretation of the material is going to be based on my experiences, whereas yours and anyone else that does it, frankly, is going to have that lens. And we get in the weeds with that, obviously.
Right. Yeah. So when you met Larry Hartsell, when you were 11 or 13, depending on how you look at it, was there any like starstruckedness because this guy touched hands with Bruce Lee?
Oh my God. I was actually looking for T-shirts. I kept all the original era shirts from back then that I no longer can wear, that we had to look like, if in that old book that Guru Dan wrote called The Art and Philosophy of Jeet Kune Do, in the back section of the book, he has a picture of all of the T-shirts that the group wore. All those shirts would be kind of sent as hand-me-downs from Guru Dan's school to here. And the three of us would just dive into those shirts. And Michael and I we'd fight over who has this shirt or that shirt. But to answer your question, when I met Larry Hartsell, I was awestruck because, again, Bruce Lee had just died. And, I'm a little kid cutting up my mama's broom handle making nunchucks, and this man trained with Bruce Lee. Now, a backdrop, I actually saw Bruce Lee once at 6 years old before he became famous. Bruce Lee came to Charlotte on a couple of occasions with Van Williams. I didn't realize this until way after he passed away. They used to do our carousel parade. Adam West and Burt Ward and Van Williams and Bruce Lee would come, and they'd have the Green Hornet and the Batmobile in the parade. And it so happens that in 1968, 69, the first Taekwondo school that was opened in Charlotte, the students there, the children, and I was amongst the children, got an opportunity to go to a theater here, and Bruce Lee was there, and he was promoting the Marlowe movie with James Garner. Now, I didn't know anything about any of this. I'm in the first grade. All I know is that's Kato, and he's a bad guy. And I'm that bad guy. And we got a Matchbox. I remember getting a Matchbox car from him and a little Kato mask, like a Halloween mask. And then, of course, he becomes the icon he became. But I don't equate that by saying I saw him alive, that because I stood next to him, I absorbed all of his knowledge. There are people that tell that lie all the time, but I'm not going to tell that lie. Yeah, I saw him, but he didn't teach me anything. He gave me a Hot Wheel. I was in the first grade. But thank God he taught a lot of people that I did meet. So So you were in Taekwondo when you were a kid. And then at age 11 or 13, depending on how you look at it, Larry Hartsell comes to town. So how did you hear about that? And I mean, had you been influenced by Bruce Lee over that 7-year period, and that's why you went? Well, it wasn't. It was kind of by accident. Obviously, I was obsessed with Bruce Lee, and probably like any urban kid growing up, we had the movie theaters on Saturday matinees that would show all the kung fu movies. And I mean, I wanted to be Bruce Lee. We were artists. My brother and I, we would draw cartoons and Batman and all that, but I wanted to be that. So I was trying to teach. I didn't even know how to pronounce it. I was calling it Jeet Kune Do or whatever when I was 9, and had little guys out in my mother's backyard, and we were out there trying to call ourselves the Bruce Lee fighters. I'm mail ordering anything about Bruce Lee, and I find out through
Stop there for a second. stop there for a second.
Yeah.
Because what you are describing is almost identical to how I grew up. So I have to ask you, that last name of yours, Griffith, that's a West Indian name.
Yep.
Do you have roots in the islands?
My father's side of the family is Dominican. So I am part Dominican, and very much so. On that side of the family, I have relatives. I've never met them, but I have relatives down in the Dominican Republic, and I believe we have some family in the Virgin Islands.
Okay.
And of course, my mother was part Native American, so we're kind of all mixed up in there real good. So.
Well, I'll just tell you this, just between me and you, two of my favorite girlfriends from the old days had that last name.
Oh, and I think I know one of them. We're probably fighting over the same woman. We're talking about Flojo, right? Are we talking about Florence Griffith Jr.?
No.
Oh, okay.
Literally two old girlfriends from.
Oh, two of your old girlfriends. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, you got good taste, brother. That's all I say. I understand. We here, as Martin would say.
So okay. So as a budding teenager, you get started. What can you remember when Sifu Larry would teach? Was there, like all the terminology stuff, like the 5 ways of attack and the 4 ranges of combat and all that? Was that stuff being drilled into you guys at that point?
When I first met Larry, yes and no.
Okay.
When I talk about Larry Hartsell, and I have to say it very much from like a father talking about, a son talking about a father. You have to understand, I loved Larry. Larry was more than my Sifu. Larry came to my high school reunion. Larry was there when my son was born. Larry was like a godfather to my children. Yeah. So I saw Larry Hartsell every day of my life from the time I was 11 years old until he relocated to Los Angeles in the early 90s. So when he taught, he was very raw in the early days. So did he give me that material? He would give it to me because I would ask for it. Now, Michael and Dickie and some of the others that were my seniors, they would explain more of the major hands, Pak Sao, Lop Sao, Gua Choi, what a Now Tech was. We used those phrases, but then we didn't, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because Larry was more of an advocate of sparring in those days. Day one, we put on a pair of 16, 18 ounce boxing gloves and we banged. And because I was also learning boxing at the time through the Police Athletic League, I was able to kind of stay formidable because I had a good boxing structure. It was much later on when he relocated that he became much more polished. The last time I saw Larry, I remember being so proud to see his transition because he was able to kind of go back and revisit, which he inspired me to do, to go back and revisit the piece of the material that but when you go back with, as Michael used to say, with a better set of eyes, you can appreciate it. And Larry became so well versed with things that it made me want to go back and say, it adds to authenticity of what it is we do. I've got students, for example, that teach judo. And when they talk about an origashis or those things, they get really technically correct about their pronunciation. And meeting someone, say, for example, Yugi Nakamura, one of the top guys in the JKD family, one of the most knowledgeable people I've ever met. And Guru Dan told me even about 4 weeks ago when I saw him, he said he's only made so many, maybe 5 senior instructors in the Jeet Kune Do material, and he's one of them. I watched that guy rattle off terminology that I had to go back and go, what is that? Oh, okay. Because it wasn't something that we emphasized. And it would, in turn, spur you to go back and say, revisit your Wing Chun roots. For example, training in Jeet Kune Do in that era, you're learning the Jung Fan Gung Fu, you're learning the Jung Fan kickboxing, and you're learning Jeet Kune Do, all separate pieces of the same whole, but you have to be able to step back and examine them separately to absorb them. And at the same time, remember, you're also learning the Filipino martial arts as it was taught then, learning Johnny Lacosta's system, learning the Villabrail system, learning the Ben Largusa system, and so on, and learning the nuances of those. And at the same time, trying to understand how they interrelate and how to preserve them as separate entities, but see how the cohesion of them blend together so well, which is part of it.
Was that easy to see, that cohesion, that interrelatedness? Was it easy to see?
At 11, absolutely not. Absolutely not. The advantage, if there was any of that time, and I say this to my students now, because we didn't have YouTube and all these things, we'd buy books. I mean, I've still got 5,000 books in there. I mean, Bruce Lee written bought the book, I'd go find it. You know, Michael Brown and I would go to bookstores. I still order things online, obscure books, and we took notes. I would try to draw my little stick figures just like the Tao of Jeet Kune Do, and I still have notebooks in there with little Afro versions of Bruce Lee's drawings that I did, because it would be my way of trying to keep that information relevant. And I can go back and find geometry notes from the 8th grade where I probably should have been doing geometry, but I was writing about Jeet Kune Do instead. But, you know, that was kind of how it would stick. And to my delight, Larry Hartsell was very giving. And one of the things he would do, he had all his original notes from Bruce Lee. And it was one thing to see the Tao of Jeet Kune Do printed and having that book in your hands back then, but to see the notes as they were, or the pictures in his drawn hand, not a book. And then Larry Hartsell say, take it to school and mimeograph it. Now, in those days, that meant I'm going to school using a mimeograph machine to Xerox these things. And he trusted me with that. So that gave me pictures of Bruce Lee and him that are Polaroids that were in his book. I'm looking at this going like, it was like, wow. You know what I mean? And so you take it and you become very covetous of it. So it made me very, very appreciative of the uniqueness of the fact that we were representing not just Bruce Lee's legacy, but now that Charlotte is now suddenly on the map as one of 3 places at that time in the entire world where you can get authentic instruction in that. Those are very high standards. And Larry had high standards. So Michael, Dickie, and myself have always had high standards on how we express that material to this day.
I sense that 4 decades later, being a representative of Bruce Lee's legacy is you feel identically about it as you did back then.
Absolutely. Absolutely. The same passion that drove me at 6 years of age drives me at 56. And the only difference is it hurts more to do that spinning wheel kick now. Still do it. Still do the split. You know, Michael, I say, Reuben, you can still do it, right? So, I just need you to help me up now. That's I can stay down there. Bill Wallace tells that joke all the time. He'll get down there, and I said, Bill, when we gonna get up? He said, when you help me up, kid, you know. You
know what I was trying to find? There was a video, and I'm pretty sure it was Bruce Jolly who posted it on Facebook.
You're doing the stretch, right?
Yeah, but here's the funny part. I'm looking at the video, and I'm going, when did they record me doing this?
Well, you know what? Well, we're probably family, man. You know, as they say, somewhere down in there, we're all in there connected in there. Real good.
I'm serious. You know? I'm looking at like the red T-shirt with the cutoff, whatever. I go, yeah. But
because we all did that. I mean, Guru Dan, and he admitted it much later, and I have to tell you the story of how we kidnapped him once, playfully. We kidnapped Guru Dan once, and he had Southern Fried Chicken and hung out with the brothers in the West Side, and that was cool. But no, he would come to town, right? And he would do the seminars, and whatever shirt that he had on, and this was the 80s, of course, so he might do the jagged neck and the jagged shoulders. And everybody would buy the shirt. By Monday, when we went back to the school, me, Dickie, everybody that was at the seminar, shirt was all jagged and torn up. You know, or
I used to buy 3 of each shirt. One you would keep pristine.
Exactly.
And then the other one
you would tear the other 2 apart. Exactly. And so we would do that, and then our students would do that. And Guru Dan one day, sitting with Larry, he said, isn't it funny how I can affect fashion? I never thought of myself as a fashion guy. And I'm like, I was like, you little, you know, yeah, I'm not gonna say that to him because you know it's like a seafood's like to me, he's like to always call, you know, out of respect now I say Guru Dan, but you have to understand being around him, we just said Dan. We said Larry. It was very first name basis. Obviously now I say Guru or seafood, but in those days, if we're sitting in the hotel room, it was just Dan and Larry, and they treated us as if we were their kids. And like, okay, go sit down somewhere. We're gonna tell you a great story. Which goes back to Guru Dan would fly in maybe once or twice a year. This is probably 79, 80 when he first started coming to Charlotte. Or Larry would go out there to get kept up in the material, and he would come back and he would work it with us. And Guru Dan sometimes would call on the phone, and I'll never forget, we were on a three-way phone call once. Dickie, Larry, Michael, and myself. And Guru Dan's reading off stuff. Now, we have no visual representation of it. He's reading off stuff he wants to do. So we're writing it down, trying to make sure, how do you spell that? And he said, work on it. I want to see you in 6 months. Now, we had no reference to it other than us. There's no video to go look at. There's no book written on it. And we were like, we hope it worked right. And then he'd show up, look at it, and he'd go back and tell. And I remember Vunak told me this years later, and Imada would say, he said, you guys made us look bad because Guru Dan said, they see me once a year, and look how hard they're working at this. You guys got me every day. And we felt so proud about that because it's like, we always thought of them as like the elite of the family. And we felt like kind of the stepkids in the wilderness. So just to be in the same breath as a Chris Kent or people like that, because I admire them so much. You know what I mean? And I say that to them, listen, they to me, and I've had the honor of meeting them on several occasions, and they said, oh, no, it's nothing. I said, no, you don't understand. You guys were in books that I saw growing up, so you inspired me to punch faster, kick harder, you know. So it's this kinship. It's like you think of them as extended family. So it's kind of like you saying, looking at the video, in a sense, we are extended family because Jeet Kune Do is an art, but it is a family. It's a community. And within that community, there's this exchange of love and information and growth if you're willing to get past the ego and get past all of the hierarchy crap and train it. I spend less time trying to impress you on Facebook on what I think I know. I'd rather just be out doing it. And then people go, hey, you know what, that guy Reuben is really badass and he can really do it. I'd rather be known for that than, you know, I got a soundbite every 15 seconds. Nothing wrong with that because that builds your brand. But if your brand is doing this and not enough of this, then you're going to lose something.
When I come across guys like you, because I put you in the same era as Chris Kent, right? And Jeff Imada, Tim Tackett, and those guys. I really just want to sit down and listen. That's really all I want to do.
And that's exactly how I feel even now. Tim Tackett, another example. Tim and Larry were collaborating on the first book, the Entering to Grappling the Trapping book that was going to complement the first video. And I had never met Tim Tackett. I had his 2 books on Singi Gung Fu that he had written. So I knew who he was, and I knew he was training in Guru Dan's backyard and later on at the Kali Academy. And he came to Charlotte and did a seminar. And I remember him wearing this little floppy military hat. And he was a smoker. And I guess, I mean, probably still is. I haven't seen him in years. I mean, obviously online I see him. And he taught so much material that it just blew me away because he was so technically expressive. You know, he went into the weeds of all of the terms and could explain it in ways that you had never seen. Same with Steve Grody. The first time I met Steve Grody blew my mind. It wasn't that I hadn't seen the material before, but he illuminated it in such a way that you go back and go, I got to revisit my Pentateuch, and I never looked at it through that lens before. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I was talking with Stefan Kesting 2 days ago, and I didn't really get to express it as deeply as I could have. But what you just said there about meeting somebody and them causing you to go back and revisit the material that we have. I was trying to tell Stefan, I get that. I can see why jujitsu people do that, because they have this vastness in their art.
Absolutely.
You know, But I see it in Jun Fan and Kali also, that vastness, right? Without a doubt, it's there. So I can understand why a lot of JKD people will have transitioned into jiu-jitsu also. Because to me, cerebrally, it's all the same.
Absolutely.
You know,
absolutely.
It's all the same. So I get that. First meeting with Dan Inosanto. Do you remember that?
Well, and it goes back to the kidnapping story. When he came in in the early 80s, the airport in Charlotte is on the west side of town. And the west side of town in Charlotte, which still is, but at that time was the hood, you know, not the hood as it is now, but the Brady Bunch version of the hood that we grew up in.
Yeah.
And there was an occasion where he came, and I wasn't in the car. Larry was in the car. Michael and Dickie were in the car. And so I hadn't met Guru Dan. I had simply corresponded with him because the certificates that we got then, and this kind of answers your question in a different way, and I'm going down a different track, there was no certification in those days. There was no apprenticeship program.
Right.
You were a novice, and we went through those 8 circles of hierarchy.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember getting the first certificate from Larry in maybe 77, 78, something like that. And he signed it. And he said, you got to mail this out to Sifu Dan at the Kali Academy for him to sign it. And I was like terrified I was going to lose it in the mail. And when I got it back, I mean, I was so honored to see, I didn't even Dan Inosanto's middle name. I saw Daniel A. Inosanto, you know, written on there, and then the little stamps that they put on it.
Yeah.
And I framed it like it was like, to me, it was like having my black belt from Masoyama or something. It was just so covetous, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So when in the car, by the way, Guru Dan asked Larry, says, so who's your top guy? And without hesitation, Larry said, Reuben. And to this day, I'm humbled by that, because if that's true, it's because they all helped me be that, because I was groomed to be kind of, I was the baby, so I could do everything. I could do the kicks, I could do the punches, I could do pretty much everything that my older counterparts couldn't do. And I was young and crazy enough to do it.
Mm-hmm.
So meeting him, I remember that first Friday night, we were at the school that we had, and it was just the 5 of us. And imagine, think about this. We got Dan Inosanto, this is Charlotte, North Carolina, and Larry Hartsell. And we basically get to ask them anything that we want to learn the whole night. Yeah. And I mean, we were like 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, just tell me about this, show me how to do that. And of course, I'm a kid, so I was like, I want to learn what you taught Bruce Lee with the nunchucks, right? So I'm like, because I was obsessed with wanting, you know, obviously I knew how to do it, but I wanted to know what he taught Bruce, because he taught Bruce. Yeah. And he picked up a stick. I'll never forget, he picked up a garote, and he did, you know, the kind of lob tick drill that we may do now, and said, work that. And I'm like, I didn't get it, because I was thinking he's going to pull out the nunchucks and I'm going to see something really cool. And he picked up the stick, and I was like, I didn't get it. You know, I'm a kid. Every time he'd come back after, he said, you work on it. And I said, yeah, I got it, but what's that going to do with the nunchuck? You know, because I kept expecting him to bring them out. Mm-hmm. And he didn't bring them out ever. I forced him one. I brought them to him once. And he gave me a pair that belonged to, I think, Brandon, a pair that Brandon owned. He gave them to me. And he said, do the 4 count with the nunchucks. And then he said, go watch Bruce do the outtakes in Game of Death. And then I got it, because he said, you box with him. Kind of much is the same with that. And that's a little thing, but that's the kind of teacher he was. Mm-hmm. He would take whatever pebble or nugget of interest that you have, mm-hmm. and he would illuminate it in such a way that you would look at that as a nugget of gold. And he would say, leave no stone unturned. He'd look at a gravel driveway that had mm-hmm. 10,000 rocks in it, and he would tell me, that's his statement to this day. Say, Reuben, leave no stone unturned. And that's what I do every day. I take the stones that they've given us, and I flip them over to try to look at all the brilliance of it. Yeah. Whether it's trapping, whether it's footwork, whether it's cadence, whether it's understanding the terminology, or for me personally now, revisiting the dummy sets, or doing more chisao work, or what skill set that I have an interest in, and just refining it. Mm-hmm. Or going back, I have my senior student under me, I'm making him learn Sulim Dao and the five gate form, not so much that he needs to learn it, but because it's part of the old material and even the old kicking sets. And some people may say, well, what's the relevance of it? There's something in that that's relevant that I want him to see, because when I went back, I saw something that my younger I missed.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah. So Daniel Villar, we just became friends on Facebook.
He's a good dude. He's a good dude.
He said I wrote it down here. He says that you've helped him immensely with martial art philosophy. What might he be talking about?
Daniel and I met probably about 7-8 years ago at a facility I was working at part-time, and he is a boxing trainer that actually has ties to Nacho Beristain, which is probably the premier boxing trainer out of Mexico. And he also has a background in Qigong and Tai Chi and some Iron Palm. And since you're out there, Daniel, I want you practicing, dude. When I see you, so I'll put you back on the spot. No, but he's a really great guy. But he sometimes, it's kind of like in the martial arts world, if you're not the star or if you're not the favorite student, sometimes you can kind of be marginalized. And he was somebody that just didn't sometimes feel that he had the qualification or the knowledge to express what he was doing. And I would say, if you have 10%, make that 10% razor sharp.
Yeah.
Whatever it is. And so he started applying that to boxing. And I would show him a little bit of Panatukan or Panajakman as far as angular movement to enhance what he was doing. And then obviously, Mexican boxing has a certain cadence and rhythm that's different than, say, Irish boxing or Filipino boxing. So it was an opportunity for me to pick his brain about Nacho Beirstein's methodology. And he's become a family friend. He was at my wedding last year, and we actually talked earlier. So thanks for the heads up, Daniel. Checks in the mail. Appreciate that. But philosophically, real short, when we talk a lot, it's about me trying to inspire him to look past what he thinks he knows or what someone may say you don't have, because he would go, well, I don't have a sash in this or a belt in that. And I would go back and say, Bruce Lee didn't have any rank. I say, you have to think about this. All these people, Chuck Norris, Mike Stone, Joe Louis, Louis Delgado, I can go on and on, names that a certain generation knows what I'm talking about. The kids probably go, who's he talking about other than Chuck Norris, right? And they had a reason. These are all seasoned veteran martial arts superstars of that era. They trained in Bruce Lee's backyard. Bruce Lee had no rank. And so how at 24 years old did he change a paradigm that changed the entire world? He was confident in his ability. He was confident in his understanding of the ability. Think about it. He took the marriage of Western boxing, Western fencing, the linear movements of a Western fencer, and Chinese Kung Fu, and merged that into a methodology that changed the trajectory of martial arts since then. I mean,
but you know what? He doesn't have a fight record, so that doesn't count.
Well, you know what? People that say that are thinking one-dimensionally, or they spend too much time on YouTube looking at cartoon Bruce Lee's. And I'm quick to say it this way: the Jeet Kune Do ring is in the alley, and people get amnesia about that. I say it is not a sport. It was never a sport. It has never been intended to be a sport. What's been taken from it that's applied as a sport can be drawn from everything, whether it be Thai boxing or Savate or Penjak Silat. I can go on and on and on. But what Bruce Lee did was his own personal observation about his own. I love what he used to always say: I found the cause of my own ignorance, and I love how he would say that. And he would say in the long street, he said, I can only help you find yours. So I mess with my students and they go, are you trying to do it? I said, that's my poor man's Bruce Lee for you to empty your cup so you can taste what I'm trying to offer you. But you get my point that he, in terms of philosophy, he applied physics through through his body, and he made his body a weapon. And that's why when he got to that place where he did that interview in 71, it says, I no longer believe in styles or methods. He was even evolving up to a place beyond what we call Jeet Kune Do.
Yes.
Returning to that original state of freedom. When he said, when I'm going to punch, I'm punching. When I'm going to kick, I'm going to kick. You know, that whole thing.
Yeah.
And when you really listen to the passion that he's speaking about, you really believe that man could do it. When he said to tell you, I have no fear of a person in front of me, you knew he meant it. And these kids can say whatever they want about whoever they think's the big flavor of the month. In a fixed setting, anybody can do anything on any night. You know, I remember my era, Benny Urquidez, bar none, probably the greatest kickboxer that ever fought in the ring. He fought the best on the East, the best on the West, fought the Japanese, the Thais, and stayed on top. I mean, the Jet is still the dude. I mean, that was the first person outside the JKD family that I absolutely wanted to go train with. Yeah. And getting a chance to meet him, it was the same thing, absorbing that type of thing. Because in his own way, he expresses himself honestly the same way Bruce does. And that's what I mean philosophically. I guess that's kind of a long way to answer what I mean with Dan.
Did you ever hear Sifu Dan say that when it came to talent and attribute set and what have you, that Benny Urquidez was probably the closest to Bruce Lee?
That's what he would say. He said he thought that in a ring, he might give him a run for his money.
Yeah.
I think that's how he would phrase it. But he wouldn't go as far as saying, I don't think he would take him, but he said he would give him a run for his money. And Sensei Urquidez has always been humble and respectful about that, because in his own mind, I mean, his fight record speaks for himself. I mean, we could talk about Benny Urquidez for hours. I mean, to my generation, I mean, these kids may talk about Conor McGregor or whoever's hot in UFC now, but they go back and watch those wars he fought in the era that he fought in. And this is an era where I remember the first fight where he gets knocked down by the bigger Japanese fighter. He had no Muay Thai training. And his brother tells him, go in there and chop the guy down. And he's throwing those leg kicks without any training, just the training he had working out of Jimmy Montoya's gym, where Bobby Chacon and Ray Boom Boom Mancini, a lot of those guys out of Southern California were training. And his boxing and his tenacity just persevered. And you see that reflected in his method and his presentation. And I think Guru Dan is right to say that. But again, as gifted as he is, Bruce Lee stands by himself. I think he will always stand by himself. There will always be people that can be new entertainers. But another person that can embody everything that he was, God made him to be what he was.
Yeah. So Larry Hartsell moves back to California in the 90s.
Right.
Were you guys in a school at that time?
We closed the school because of him moving back at that time. Because again, I had just become a dad, and we weren't certain of what direction we were going to go in. Dickie had some things going on. Michael was doing his own thing. So we kind of disbanded the school. And of course, the marketing model changed. And everybody was doing videos and seminars, and so on some level, we started doing less brick and mortar and started doing more seminars and private lessons, that kind of thing. And Larry would come back occasionally until his grappling association thing took off, and then he remarried Miss Deborah, and the rest of his history was there. The school kind of reopened under three different tridents. I'll call it a three-headed trident. I mean, Dick Harrell has his academy.
Right.
Michael has his students, and then I have my brand, and we all kind of support one another. And then, of course, you got new people that have moved into our area, and they come in, and it's amusing. They come in and say, we're bringing the first Jeet Kune Do school to Charlotte, North Carolina. And I go, here we go.
Oh, God, really?
And then Michael and I, at one time, were known as the JKD Hit Squad for that reason. Not that any of them were illegitimate, but you have to understand there was a time where there was a tremendous proliferation of phony Jeet Kune Do practitioners opening up schools. Yeah. And we'd go and shut them down, literally. But in this current era, a lot of it's just because of the new era. That, there's just more people. At one time, it was just us. Now there are probably 13 people in the local directory that have some connection to somebody, whether it's Richard Bustillo or Jerry Petit or Ted Wong or whoever. But then as far as longevity, nobody in the Southeast has been doing it longer than the three of us. They're other than Francis Fong's group, but we were there before they were. Now, Francis Fong in his own right is an amazing instructor. I think he's probably, bar none, probably the best Wing Chun man I've ever seen.
Yeah. So, because I made a note here that you're part of that elite group that has, you know, the high-end clientele and what have you, doing the private lesson stuff. So how did that come about? I mean, like the school's disbanded. So what's the next step?
Well, it was a period of kind of rediscovering that, because the interest changed. That was during the period where Taibo had become very popular in cardio kickboxing, and there seemed to be less of an interest in adults in this area wanting to learn martial arts. So they were bringing 3-year-olds and 5-year-olds, and somehow teaching tactical knife to first graders didn't quite fit my mindset. Now, Michael was okay with that, but I wasn't. I'm just joking. Michael was crazy with the knives. And we would adapt into teaching more cardio. So I ended up doing cardio kickboxing. We were certifying people, and we were trying to brand our own version of Taibo, if you will. And I kind of approached getting clients through that market base. And because of the professional wrestling connection to North Carolina, obviously professional wrestling has a big influence in Charlotte. People like Ric Flair and Rick Steamboat, they are natives to Charlotte, and Michael and I both worked with them, and we both briefly worked in that industry.
Okay.
So through working with them, therefore both of them own Gold's Gyms or Well Gym kind of facilities. That led to having clientele that, well, they were immersed themselves in this, but then they'd say, well, this guy teaches a little gung fu or a little bit of this, and it would grow from that. And then when the opportunity to do the karate colleges came through Jerry Beasley, and that's, we did that too. But that led me to meeting Howard Williams and Taki Kimura, which was an incredible experience, because Howard Williams, again, is another individual that, to me, amongst JKD people, is unsung, and he's passed away. And Howard was, I had never heard of Howard Williams.
Spoke very highly of him.
He was a fantastic guy. I met Howard Williams, and he had the afro like Jim Kelly, you know, when I met him, and I had never heard of him. And he had met Bruce Lee and James Lee, we called him Jimmy Lee, when he was 15 years old, and he trained at the Oakland School. So his presentation on the Jeet Kune Do material was fascinating to me, because the footwork was different, his posturing was different, the tendency to go from mid-range emphasis versus the long range that we would do was very interesting. And I wanted to pick his brain on that. And that opened the door to doing more of that, because that's what he was doing. He was wanting to kind of create a network of like-minded, not just African Americans, but people connected within the family. And Ted Wong had the same idea. Let's just do regional seminars, get together and do many camps here and there. And so it would lend itself to that. And then the UFC came along, the original UFC, and we were involved in that. We actually had a fighter from Charlotte that competed in the third one. And along with that, opportunities for people that trained in Valetudos and some pancreas stuff. And it kind of continued in that vacuum. The brick and mortar thing would kind of manifest and would die out. It's not like Los Angeles, where you got a core diehard group of people that want to do it all the time. I got students that love it, and then I got people that's like, well, I'll do it and I'll see you again in 6 months. And it's kind of hard to keep a building open when you got that type of interest. So, and people are fickle here. I mean, this is the South. I mean, this is the good old boy South. So some of them, they like their brand more vanilla, should I say? And I don't mean that to be as overt as that sounds, but everything's in presentation. So sometimes if people only look at my freckles, I'll say it that way, and not look at the knowledge base behind it, they may overlook me for somebody else who they perceive by their their complexion might know more. And you know where I mean when I go there without me going there. So some of it has been that. But so I have tended to spend more time reaching out to people that are interested, doing seminars. Before I saw your site, obviously another colleague that's a friend of both of ours, Johnny Williams, has this Everything is Gung Fu thing.
Yes.
And Johnny and I buddied up, and I started doing admin stuff, and we'd post stuff. And to me, it was like yours, a great vehicle to kind of say, here's something relevant. You know, I'm not going to get into this side or that side, but take a look at the way this guy's practicing the art. You might learn something, or here's some vintage footage of something. And it made me feel like I was contributing, even if it wasn't me personally on the videotape. It was me promoting the family. You know what I mean? Yeah. And hopefully using it as a vehicle when there is a camera on me, say, well, hey, by the way, here's mine too. You know what I mean? So where it is now, Legendary Fighting Arts and Fitness is my brand. And 2019, I'm planning to do more in the way of seminars and clinics. And there are people that are in Larry Hartsell's network that reach out to me because of that connection, that have an appreciation for the boxing, for the kickboxing, for the stand-up. Obviously, there are people well-versed in the grappling range, so I leave them to do that. Although I was taught that, Larry taught me the core JKD, everything. We didn't just do grappling in the beginning, even though Larry Hartsell is known for the grappling. But when I met Larry, that wasn't the first thing we did. It wasn't the second thing we did. That came along a little later in my training, actually.
Wow. So do you know Del Pollard?
I have met Del, don't know him all that well. I think a lot of them.
So he and I were once kidding around and about the number of things that are wrong with Jeet Kune Do today. Right? And he said, well, he goes, we don't have enough hours for me to go into it. So,
how about days?
So he never confirmed a Dialogues episode with me like you did. So I'm going to ask you now, right?
Okay.
So
oh boy.
No pressure. What's something that after all this passage of time, people still don't get about Jeet Kune Do? They still don't understand about Jeet Kune Do.
It is, it's always going to be hard to put that into a short answer. But I love something that Guru Dan said to me recently, and this might partially address that. He would often say that technique without reflex is useless. And what I think he means by that, or my interpretation of that, is that there are a lot of people that know the name. They say Jeet Kune Do, weight intercepting fist, blah, 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 Bruce Lee. And it's like they want to wear it to be a member of a club or a group or fraternity. And they do that first. Whereas my era, we saw Bruce Lee as this very lofty, almost deity individual that we wanted to preserve this research that he did. And I think what's gotten lost is that the research isn't about so much changing this material, because I think what he did in the 60s, if practiced and trained properly, is just as relevant and deadly in 2018. But there are people that will say, oh, the stuff in the 60s didn't work as well as Thai boxing or this. And all those things are great arts. And if you are going to practice Jeet Kune Do, you need to practice it like a fighter. And I say that to say, if I was training boxers, and I train boxers and Muay Thai fighters and MMA guys here, and they're not interested in terminology, they're not interested in the hierarchy and the nuances that you and I as scholars might be. They want to know how to be able to apply it. Now, when Bruce Lee took Wing Chun, the piece of it that he had, and people get into the argument about how much Wing Chun he had. What he had, he got from Yip Man. He was damn good at it, and he changed the world with it. But he trained like a fighter. He trained the same way a prize fighter approached martial arts. I mean, if you think about the videos you see out on YouTube and places now, and you'll see a guy that's a Wing Chun guy. God bless him. You see a Wing Chun guy fighting an obscure MMA fighter, and he get trounced. And people go, I told you that old-fashioned gung fu stuff's useless. And it is not useless. That guy is so structured in trying to do it technically that he never developed the fight prowess. But here's the thing, you have to be careful with that, because if you modify it too much, then the purists will go, well, it's not Wing Chun anymore. You know what I mean? Or if you make it too kickboxy, then it's not Wing Chun anymore. And I don't think you have to change it, but you have to make it aggressive. You have to train it that way. And I think that learning the material, being able to recite it, being able to go finger jab, wah choi, pak soi, ping choi, whatever combination you want to throw, you can recite it 10 times. But if you're not putting snap behind it, if you're not putting timing, if you're not working on cadence and distancing and working the reflex against an advancing or retreating opponent, working both leads, all those little things that only come in working it as a live exercise, it still becomes static, even Jeet Kune Do. And that's, to me, I think, is one of the, if I want to call it a failing, and that's not an indictment on any individual. That's just, sometimes you see people, and you go to, I go to seminars or teach places, and you see somebody that's really gifted, and they're really doing it. It's like, they got it. You know what I mean? You see somebody like, they may only have that piece of it, but they got an understanding that piece. And then you see people that's got a wealth of knowledge, but their skill sets are mediocre. And there's no reflection on their ability. It's just that they haven't chosen to stoke it beyond that level, so their presentation comes off as passive. And I'm obviously going to be influenced by Larry Hartsell till I die. Larry Hartsell was a lot of things. He was not passive at all. And even trapping, if anybody that's out there that ever did trapping with Larry, or put gloves on with Larry, or held mitts with Larry Hartsell, when he hit light, he was hitting hard. Right. The first time I met Larry Hartsell, I got knocked out, as in asleep, knocked out, and he wasn't trying to hurt me. And he's like, because I'm sitting there flicking Ali jabs and all this. Hey, kid, that's good. You got good reflexes, blah, blah, blah. And he backed me in the corner. I had no knowledge of ring generalship from 11. And because Larry boxed, a lot of people didn't know Larry was a sparring partner for people like Jersey Joe Walcott. He had an extensive boxing background. Right. And I learned more from Larry Hartsell on how to throw left hooks and how to throw liver shots.
Now you say that, I wonder, I would love to, can you imagine if there was video of Larry Hartsell and Richard Bustillo boxing? That would have been huge.
That would have been huge. And Richard was a fantastic boxer, fantastic martial artist. The meeting him, and that was the thing, because obviously you always want to compare and contrast. And first time I saw Richard Bustillo, and he did Sinewa, that was the first thing I saw him do. And he did it different than Dan. He was much more 1, 2, 3, and it threw me like, why are you doing it that way? I didn't get it at first, because he was researching the Dosey Party system and the Kennedy Brothers system, and they structurally taught it differently. Where Guru Dan's much more fluid, and it's more of that. But when he would do the boxing, you would see him put that shoulder into it. The drop step that Jack Dempsey did. Richard Bustillo was the first guy that told me, he said, I should go get that book that Jack Dempsey wrote. And I go to, even now, I refer to that now, and you see Bruce references that in the Tao Jeet Kune Do. That drop step. A lot of these principles, they were here before Bruce Lee, but he found this unique hypothesis where he applied them to Chinese Kung Fu. The way that he was able to take 126 pounds when he died and could knock guys 230, 240 across the room from 3-4 inches was phenomenal. I tell people now, John Saxon said it, the actor. He asked Bruce Lee before he died, he said, Bruce, if you were 250 pounds and you could do what you do, what would you? He said, Bruce Lee said, if he was that size and had that agility, he ruled the world. Because look how phenomenal he was at his size. I mean, you got those pictures behind you, and you look at that stuff, it's like it never gets old. I watch Enter the Dragon every time it comes on TV. Michael Brown used to go to the theater on a Friday night, and this was before there were videos, and would watch Enter the Dragon 15 times until they threw us out because I missed it. Oh, shit, he was trying to get me. Did you see the finger jab before he did the kick? I saw. And you couldn't rewind it. I mean, that's how that level of dedication you get because you really want to understand the nuances. Yeah. It was theatrical, but his timing and his explanation, because he was trying to teach through the films. He was showing you Jeet Kune Do in the films. People mistake that.
Did you ever hear, and I always give him credit for this, Joe Rogan said once that Bruce Lee might not have competed a lot, but it's obvious that he spent a lot of time sparring to develop himself. Obvious.
Absolutely. Once Larry and Dan, Sifu Larry and Guru Dan, they would talk about an occasion that a guy that was I want to say might have been a middleweight contender. This is 67, 68, whatever period of time at the Los Angeles school, and saw Bruce Lee working on the heavy bag, kind of like the video that we can all see now of him teeing off on the bag. And the guy thought at first, kind of like a lot of people that are maybe more prudish, they'll say, well, he's not carrying his hands properly, he's not a pure boxer and that. And then they look at it more closely and see how much torque and inertia that he's applying and go, that guy could be champ in like 2 days, because he knew how to put his body behind everything. And that to me is a part and parcel of your original question about what sometimes I think is lacking in JKD, depending on the practitioners, that you don't want to make it so much about the art that you take the razor's edge of it away. I think Jeet Kune Do is a fighting art. I mean, it is a martial art. It is a high study. It is research and all that. But to me, Jeet Kune Do will always be a fighting art. Larry Hartsell was Bruce Lee's premier Jeet Kune Do fighter. That's what he was left as. That's how Guru Dan described him. And that's the guy that taught us. So my Jeet Kune Do is about fighting. And I earnestly believe that a good Jeet Kune Do man is a damn good boxer. He's a damn good kicker. He's a damn good Wing Chun man. He's a damn good in and out guy. And he's got great submission. He's kind of I don't want to say jack of all trades, but he has to be somewhat a master of all trades. And because and not everybody's good at that.
You know what I call that?
Yeah.
I call that a master jack.
Yes, absolutely, exactly. Yeah. Great word.
Yeah.
And there's so much that we can learn. As I loved you had Ron Balicki on a few weeks back, and he was, and I don't know if it's your show that he was on or something else I saw that Michael had sent me, and he was talking about aging as a martial artist in the clip that I saw. And we all get older, and we'll jokingly say, I remember when I could do that and it didn't hurt or all this. And you kind of find, how do you modify the material to fit what your physical gifts are if you're 20 versus when you're 30 or when you're 50, or if your back goes out. Or I think of somebody like Clay Johnson. Clay Johnson is probably one of the most knowledgeable JKD people in the world. And he's in a wheelchair.
Yeah.
The cat's in a wheelchair.
Yeah.
And he teaches Filipino martial arts, Jung Fan, the whole nine, and he does it from a wheelchair. And God bless him. Every time he posts stuff out there, I got nothing but love for Clay. Hey, Clay, if you're out there, you're my man. But I say that to say, because his dedication from a wheelchair is that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I watched the stuff you put out there, and I recently I saw a couple of your class tapes. I'm going like, okay, I like that. I like the way you threw that jab, kept your hand up, good job. But I mean, I say that out of love, because when you see somebody that's really working it, and you can look at their skill sets and go, that guy has it. It makes you feel good. It makes you feel like if you and I suddenly aren't here tomorrow, there's still people out there that will keep it from dying. That was the fear. Was that it would die out and get watered down like some of the other martial arts and just become this obscure, passe thing that the kids think it is. And that's, to me, I throw that out to my JKD colleagues out there that may be inclined to think the same way. It is on us to make sure that people remember that Bruce Lee should never not be relevant. And not just as a movie star or an author, an icon, but the reason that there is a UFC. And Horty and Gracie told the world years ago, they modeled the UFC off of the last fight Bruce Lee ever filmed, which was with Samo on the set of Enter the Dragon. The gloves they use in the UFC are the Kempo gloves shaven down that we use in Jeet Kune Do. And even the submission that he applied was the model for it. And people don't give him enough credit because, well, he didn't fight. He doesn't have a fight record. In the ring, what would that prove? Jeet Kune Do was fight record. Ask the guy that came off the fence and Enter the Dragon that challenged him on the set. Ask the guy that came in his backyard that challenged them to say, are you really that good, that they had to cover up in the Hong Kong press when he damn near killed the guy. Ask the guy on the stage in Hong Kong when they called him a young punk and he got up, instead of trying to push the guy off the thing, he dropped him with a shot because he said he doesn't push, he punches.
Yeah.
You know, that's the arrogance of it, but that's also the mastery of the man, because he wasn't afraid to say, you know what, I'm a fighter. I'll fight. And his fight was in the street. You know, you can't finger jab in the cage. You can't finger jab in a boxing glove. You can't kick a guy in the groin in that. But, you know, people, they give it a pass if it's Krav Maga, because people think of that, well, that's combat. But they want to think of Jeet Kune Do as something else because Bruce Lee became famous as an actor. And I think that he should be remembered for the films because they live on their own. But his books, his recordings, what his daughter's doing to keep his legacy going, Bruce Lee changed the world.
Yeah.
I mean, the reason all of us do this is because that little guy decided when he was 13 and his gang wasn't behind him anymore that he better go learn how to fight. and he went to Yip Man, and the rest is history. And, you know, I mean, we're all chasing him now. Yeah. You know, think about it.
I own a domain, right, called howbruceleechangedtheworld.net. Because
I love it.
.com is owned by you know, they did a documentary a few years ago. So they own .com, right? So I don't know if I'll ever get in trouble if I do something with it, right?
Just talk to Shannon. Talk to Shannon.
Yeah.
we love you, baby girl. We love you.
Yeah. Okay. So listen. So I want to start to wrap this up, and I'm going to ask you. The question is about your being in charge, if you had been in charge. So it's, if you had been in charge back then, would you have done anything differently? If you were in charge today, is there anything that you would do differently when it comes to promotion, preservation, promulgation of Jeet Kune Do?
Wow.
I know. Yeah, I should have warned you about this one.
Yeah. There's a catchphrase that I created at one time for our school that used to be called the Jeet Kune Do Academy, that became the North Carolina Academy of Martial Arts, or legendary. And our phrase is, we want to preserve the legacy through innovation. And I like to think that whether I was me in charge then or now, or have any say in steering the boat, that the preservation of the material in its entirety is important. Meaning that if you teach somebody that's going to represent your school, your brand, meaning his brand, meaning Guru's Dan brand, meaning ultimately Bruce Lee's brand, that person's well versed. So I probably would not have made as many instructors as quickly as they started coming out, but understood the why. The why was, we were worried it was going to die.
Yeah.
So what you started getting though were people that went from novice to apprentice instructor, and that created a lot of people that had, in the beginning, a limited amount of information, but an enormous umbrella to say that they were instructors on. You have somebody that spent 16 hours at a seminar, but they'd go back to their school, take the Taekwondo sign down, and they got a JKD Kali Academy until next year, and they got another 16 hours. And then you got somebody that's 7, 8, 10 years in, that's there every day, and you're going like, that doesn't add up. And fast forward, I think that the emphasis on concept versus original, that argument would have, to me, never taken the direction it took, simply because, bottom line, you can't have one without the other. Yeah. You can't have the concept if you don't understand the original material.
Yeah. And
that was an ugly time. You think about it. That was the time where the family was kind of marginalizing the guy that was left by Bruce Lee himself in charge of it. And Guru Dan was gracious enough to say at the end in one of Black Belt magazine articles, he said, you know what? I alone was left with the responsibility to do that. And I was there and you weren't. And I remember that being a bravo moment, because he finally took the reins himself and said, you know what? You guys can criticize, write articles, whatever. I was there. I was there when he coined the phrase. I was there on the receiving end of it. He was my friend. I mean, he still gets teary-eyed when he talks about that, man. He does. We talk about him as somebody we admire. He talks about him as somebody that he spent birthdays with. There's a difference. Mm-hmm. And I think that all of us owe a certain amount of duty to being covetous of this. This is something special. This isn't nothing against Taekwondo or Karate or Kung Fu or any of those things. But Bruce Lee being kind of at the top of the heap, there's still only so many of us that have really been given full access to that material. Yeah. And to squander that, or to half train it, or to water it down to make a buck just to exploit it, to me would be the worst thing for it. And you see that manifestation when it happens. Thank God that a lot of those people have kind of fallen by the wayside. People like Tommy Carruthers have come along and taken it to the UK. You're doing your thing. Johnny's got his post. You got Chris Kent. He's doing another thing where he's trying to keep the conversation on a positive tip. You know, there's so many people that are spending all their time in cyberspace making negatives out of everything rather than training and sharing information. I mean, imagine what it would be like if we had not a karate college every, but we did a Jeet Kune Do college, kind of like a Jeet Kune Do collective where the family got together, like the Dog Brothers call it the gathering of the pack, where everybody got together and it was an exchange of information. We trained, we did seminars together, and probably on some level that happens. But imagine what that would look like if all the so-called different groups and clans did that. Well, it was semi-annual. Can you imagine how much material you would learn, how many different points of view? Yeah. I mean, talking to Johnny Williams about Mike Lee. You know, I read about Mike Lee and Jesse Glover's book.
You mean Mike Lee from Seattle?
From Seattle.
I trained with him.
And when he told me that, I was like, both of you guys get this from me, because I've never met Mike Lee, but I was in awe of what I learned from Sifu Jesse. And I always wanted to meet him because, you know, again, let me be this for a moment. You know, I'm a little black kid from West Charlotte, and I see Bruce Lee's first student as a black guy. I'm going, oh, cool, you know. And then you read the book and you see Mike Lee and the pictures of him as this big muscular guy doing this, and you go, cool, I want to be that guy. Yeah. And I still have those books. And so, and when Johnny said, well, that was his first instructor, so you strike up a friendship, you know. Well, he said, what's it like training with Larry? I said, what's it like training with Jesse? Right. I don't know. Let's go find out. And so, in my case, I got to train with them both. And I think Johnny's had the experience of training with Larry too. And I'm assuming you've had some exposure. You've met Larry, right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I trained a number of times with him, but I always stayed as far away from him as I could, because I used to be this big.
Well, I was that big, and I didn't stay away from him. I didn't see that was the thing. I didn't stay big.
I never wanted him to grab a hold of me.
And see, I couldn't hide from him, because that's the only negative about being his prized pupil. It's like, oh, well, he's got to take it. So it's like, and he was like, okay, I'm gonna take the shot. I'm gonna take it like a man. Then say, how'd that feel? Like, and I couldn't get the word. I was like, you know, Larry hit hard, man. He hit hard, but he hit with love, man. Yeah. God rest his soul.
All right. Listen, man, on that note, right? Here's what I was not aware of before we started talking. I was not aware that you were a preeminent Jeet Kune Do historian.
Oh, well, I wasn't either. Well, thank you.
I wasn't aware. This has been an immense pleasure. I am so glad, you know, I owe this to Michael Brown. He said, you got to talk to Reuben.
Well, I owe him a check too. So. Yeah. Michael's like family. I mean, if there wasn't for Michael Brown, there wouldn't be a me. He's my big brother. When Mike was driving me to the school when I was riding a bicycle. So I've known him since I was a kid. So,
you know, and that,
God bless him.
That special relationship, there are so many of those type relationships in our Jeet Kune Do clan, you know, and so part of my mission is to bring all of that out, to expose all of that so that people know just how great the whole JKD family is. And you're a part of that. And I really appreciate your spending some Friday afternoon time with me, man.
Oh, it was my pleasure. And we'll do it again sometime. And I'm looking forward to actually getting down there with you, getting you up here we can play.
Sure. Anytime.
We'll do it.
All
Thank you so much. And thanks for everybody that listened and my guys around here. I'll see you Monday. I hope you worked out.
All right. Take care, man.
Take care. Thank you so much.
Talk to you soon.
Bye. All right. Bye now.